Businessworld Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Justin Delos Santos. It's the start of a new trading day, but first, let's go straight to our top story. Moody's Analytics sees a deeper contraction for the Philippines this year, saying the country faces continued uncertainty due to struggles in containing the pandemic. Stephen Cochrane, Moody's Analytics chief economist for the Asia Pacific region, expects domestic GDP to shrink by 9.2%, deeper than its July outlook of negative 3.1%. This is also more pessimistic than the contraction estimate of the government, which ranges from 4.5 to 6.6%. Despite this, Cochrane says the Philippines is, quote, already digging itself out of a deep hole, noting that easing restrictions in the third and fourth quarters will drive improvement in consumption as well as manufacturing production. The resumption of infrastructure projects will also contribute to employment and economic output, according to Cochrane. For 2021, Moody's Analytics expects Philippine GDP to grow by 7.8%, higher than the government's projection of 6.5 to 7.5%. But Cochrane notes that the Philippines, together with Indonesia and India, are the economies with the greatest need for fiscal support. So far, two stimulus packages have provided a total of 440 billion pesos for the country's pandemic response. Meanwhile, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says the economy's reopening will be tackled during the cabinet meeting with President Duterte on October 12th. All right, Dan, time to take a step back for a moment here as we let the markets percolate. But how are equities faring offshore?
All right, so a lot of volatility happening in the past week of trading, specifically because of President Donald Trump having contracted the COVID-19 virus, as you know. So many things going on there. Just a very quick recap on how Wall Street performed overnight. You can see the Dow Jones up by 1.9%, the S&P 500 up by 1.8%, and NASDAQ as well, enjoying some very big gains here. Now, what has been going on? When President Donald Trump contracted the virus, there was a sell-off in the markets, and then he did this tweet saying that stimulus needs to be passed, and that actually caused investors to speculate that because President Donald Trump was in the hospital, had a first degree experience of the virus, that he might be pushing for these fiscal reforms to be happening quite quickly. And then once he was okay na and then back to work in the White House, he basically said, okay, this stimulus will be pushed back until after he, so to speak, wins the election, as he put it, on November. So again, a sell-off. And so that was yesterday. Ngayon na naman, there's a lot of optimism, and this according to some analysts. Investors are mulling encouraging signs for Joe Biden to be winning, so he's now having a bigger margin in the November presidential elections, and this could mean a bigger stimulus. Now, just to recall, the Democrats are pushing for a $2.2 trillion stimulus, which is significantly higher than what the White House has been pushing for, and this comes after Fed Jerome Powell's remarks saying that they need this for the economy. If not, this would really have very bad effects if the stimulus is not passed. Meanwhile, you've got oil nudging higher. This in the wake of U.S. government data showing that the first crude stockpile had gained in the past 4 weeks. And if you take a look at the COVID cases, meanwhile, coronavirus returning to New York, you've got infections reaching a 3-month high in New York, France reporting a record number of new cases, Italy's infections spiking to the highest since April. So not a lot of encouraging signs when it comes to the virus front. Let's take a quick peek at how Asia is performing. And a lot of the futures were pointing precisely to what is happening right now, which is some good gains following the Wall Street rally overnight. The Topix up by 0.4%, the Nikkei 225 as well over in Japan up by 0.6%. But the Hang Seng as well enjoying some gains here. But over in Singapore, you've actually got a pullback of 0.2%. Let's take a quick peek at our own local bourse. You said, markets are still percolating right now. We've just really opened. And interestingly, we were closing in the red yesterday. Now we are back up by 0.17%, but still below the levels that we were hoping for. We had already broken through that 6,000 support, psychological support, resistance rather level. And then we're back to 5,800 levels here. So we had fallen for the third consecutive day on Wednesday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all in the red. Sentiment was pulled down, as I mentioned, by a lot of global events. And this, according to AAA's Chris Mangon, investors are continuing to focus on some second liners, while those holding the index continue to close their positions. And he says they're closing positions because they anticipate a further sell-off once the third quarter GDP numbers are reported. So this is something very
Mhm.
worrying here. Another thing I have to point out, net foreign selling ballooning, that shot up to 1.3 billion pesos that we lost na naman yesterday, the 19th straight day of an outflow. Now, this according to Aniceto Pangan of Diversified Securities, worries on supply chain bottlenecks. Another issue we have here, apart from COVID, ASF, African swine fever, and even the La Nina weather patterns. So a lot more upside risks when we talk about supply constraints. Nevertheless, quite a lot of trading actually yesterday. So that's around 7.11 billion worth of trades, which is more than what we've seen in a lot of months actually. So let's take a quick peek at some sectors here, mostly in the red, I have to say, except properties, which seem to be the ones pulling the bourse up because they're actually trading in the green right now. So properties up by 0.3%, whereas financials are down by 0.7%. But I do want to focus on one sector and check in on the mining counter. This, as the finance department is saying, they're now looking to revive this, let's say, seemingly sleepy, counter here, or even entire industry. Recall they've had a lot of regulatory issues here, a huge mining review, a lot of shutdowns and temporary suspension of permits. Now they are trying to revive this through the sale of mining assets and the passage of a long-awaited tax measure. So this from the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, they've identified mineral production agreements that are up for disposal via public auction. So Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez is saying the government now wants to privatize some state mining assets. That includes copper and nickel mines, and they're pushing for the revival because this industry still nevertheless provides jobs in many areas. So they are providing jobs in rural areas, and they're also hoping to get some tax revenues from this. Recall that proposed tax sharing revenues from the mining industry is still to be approved over in Congress. But take a look at the mining sector, up by 4.4% in just the first 9 minutes of trade. On the back of this news, Nickel Asia up by 8.8%, Global Ferronickel up by 8.5%. So really the sector to be watching out for today. Now I'm just going to take a step back and take a quick peek at the airline industry. This naman, as the government says, they're going to be supporting it, but they're no longer interested in owning these airlines. And that actually runs counter to what NEDA Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua had said before, that they might actually be taking equity stakes in some troubled industries such as airlines. So now this is from Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez. The government will be willing to assist. We are in deep discussions with them. But let me point out that whatever assistance will be part of the entire process. So the private sector banks will have to do the majority of the assistance. And I quote, I'd like to point out that the government does not want to end up owning the airlines. Now, the reaction of the airlines has been that's fine. Any assistance is actually welcome.
Mhm.
Right now, Cebu Pacific is up by 35 centavos. It's up by 9/10 of 8%. And PAL is trading flat right now. And just one thing for Cebu Pacific, they're actually seeking to raise $500 million, and that's to fund their transformation. So that they're going to be issuing preferred shares and also a private placement of a bond. Jess.
All right, the airline industry really proving to be vulnerable here amid the pandemic. Now, Dan, from this troubled industry, let's move on to the financial space. We've been hearing a lot how digital transactions have actually boomed during the pandemic. Now, this time you have the central bank attempting to create a more enabling environment for digital banks. What are the requirements here?
Okay, so digital banks seem to be the future now, Jess. And these are basically banks that have a license of any other bank. However, they're not allowed to have a brick and mortar
Mhm.
presence or branches. So they should have a head office, but everything else will be digital. So we have a couple already, but now they're creating minimum capital requirements for these new banks that want to be operational, and also for normal, let's say, traditional banks that want to shift into becoming digital banks. So first, it's basically 1 billion pesos. But actually, if you have a basic digital bank, it's just going to be 400 million pesos. So with 400 million, you can do basic services. So savings deposits, foreign currency deposits, unsecured loans, remittances, and bills. Okay. So if you want to increase that to a real banking, let's say, operations here like credit cards and all of these things, you would then need to have at least 900 million pesos up to 1 billion pesos. So very exciting times here. Let's see how many will be applying for a digital banking license. Meanwhile, just want to take a quick peek at China Bank, that's down by 0.2% this morning. They said that they have just raised 15 billion pesos from bond offering, and that's as investors had swarmed their bond offering. It was oversubscribed and closed ahead of time. So they said that this was overwhelming demand, speaks of the confidence in the bank and also in capital markets in these challenging times. Now, Jess, off to some bad news, so to speak. Yet again, more harrowing figures here when it comes to multilaterals watching our economy here. They're saying that
Mhm.
millions of people in the region are expected to fall into poverty. How bad are these projections yet again?
Well, 9 million people, that's how bad it's going to be here, at least according to the World Bank. They're predicting that a minimum at least of 5.3 million residents of the East Asia and the Pacific are actually going to fall into extreme poverty due to the pandemic here, pretty much saying really that the crisis has erased the progress made on poverty reduction efforts, and that pretty much gives rise to the new poor. Now, we're going to dwell on that more on later, but for now, just to give you an idea here, globally, the World Bank is saying, in fact, that around 88 million to 115 million people are going to be pushed into extreme poverty. And that really is proving that it's going to be an uphill climb to actually reach the global poverty rate of 3% by 2030. Again, this, of course, is coming from the Poverty and Shared Prosperity report of the multilateral here. They are expecting extreme poverty globally to increase up to 1.2% in 2020. That compares to just the 0.8% extreme poverty in the early part of 2020. And also, just to give you an idea, extreme poverty here, of course, puts a threshold at least for those people who are earning less, or at least who are living less than $2 a day, or around 100 pesos for us here. Now, the pandemic, according to them, widened the income inequality gap despite government efforts to actually redistribute income. And that threatens, according to them, the inclusiveness of economic recovery, and that may actually result to long-term effects here, especially when you're talking about job losses, income shocks, and diminished job opportunities. Now, again, they are saying it's going to give rise to the new poor. So what is a new poor exactly? These are those who actually fell into poverty because of the pandemic, and three-quarters of that actually are coming from middle income economies. And the thing is, these are not your common vulnerable population here. They are, in fact, people who live in urban areas with access to good infrastructure. They are more educated, they are paid employees, and are working in probably in sectors like manufacturing, services, and even commerce. And that's where the challenge lies here, Dan. The need to balance support for the regularly vulnerable and the new poor.
That's very, concerning here, especially since it's not just that poor people will be less taken out of poverty, but
Mhm.
even those that were not poor to begin with are now going to be falling into poverty. And what is the situation here in the Philippines?
All right, at least in the Philippines, they've said this before, but this time, yeah, they are saying that 2 million more Filipinos will actually slide into poverty. That's based on the threshold here in the country, which is around $3 a day, at least or at least for those people who live around $3 a day. Now, recall that back in 2015, this is the latest survey that we've had. There are around 7.8 million extreme poor Filipinos. So that means add 2 million more by the end of 2020. Then that more or less we're going to have 9 million Filipinos who are in extreme poverty, at least coming up from the 2015 figures. But at the same time, they are saying that the poverty rate in the country is going to increase 20 to 22.4%. It's coming from 20.5% just last year. At the same time, when it comes to shared prosperity, however, they are saying it remains positive for most of the region, and that includes the Philippines. But that has also declined as average incomes have been reduced. Now, they are saying the situation is going to persist until the virus is controlled and the lockdowns are eased and growth resumes. But then pretty much that explains really the uncertainty. There's pretty much uncertainty over how long the recession will last and its probable effect on shared prosperity.
And of course, the government already pointing out that there's a risk for above 17% unemployment, at least in the short term. Thank you, Jess, for that update.
Now, here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. Online shopping in the Philippines has grown 36% in the first half of 2020 as social commerce sees rapid expansion in Southeast Asia. In a survey conducted by Taiwan-based AI firm Eikala, it found that Filipinos are relatively less frequent shoppers than their peers from Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore. However, Eikala also noted that Filipinos still spend nearly the same amount of money on goods sold online. The firm explained that the acceleration of social media shopping was on the back of consumers being stuck at home while observing quarantine measures. The company added that live selling has become the popular shopping trend in the Philippines because it mimics in store shopping. The study also found that women aged 25 to 34 were the most frequent online shoppers in the country. Now, the government is urging businesses to prioritize retaining and upskilling employees post pandemic. In yesterday's Philippine Business Conference and Expo, Vice President Leni Robredo says businesses should keep their staff employed even as they take concrete steps to stay afloat. She said business owners should take a look at their supply chains to assess whether some of their needs can be sourced from smaller local producers. The vice president added that at a time of great need such as now, helping each other should take precedence over growth and profits. At the same time, Robredo said businesses should ensure minimal health risks on the part of its workers. She says social distancing and minimum safety practices should become entrenched in the culture of local businesses.
The Energy Department reports a 22.8% drop in total petroleum demand in the first half of the year. That's as fuel imports plunged by over 35%. The agency's Oil Industry Management Bureau attributed the decline to reduced economic activity during the lockdown. The demand for diesel oil dropped 21%, while demand for gasoline declined over 20%. Liquefied petroleum gas demand, meanwhile, fell by 4.6%. The country's big three oil companies, that's Petron, Pilipinas Shell, and Chevron, serviced almost 50% of the market, while the remainder supplied by independent retailers and direct importers. Now, Petron and Pilipinas Shell posted an almost 20% decrease in combined output as both closed their refineries in May due to the ECQ. In August, Pilipinas Shell decided to permanently close its refinery in Tabangao, Batangas, and convert it to an import terminal. And just this week, Petron confirmed reports that they are considering the permanent closure of the refinery in Bataan. The local index seems to be recovering a touch, but based on the week to date, it seems to be losing the steam it gained just last week. But the second liners, though, have been making a comeback. Here to chat with us about exciting plays, we have with us Video Capital's President Ed Francisco. Good morning, sir. Welcome back.
Good morning, Danie.
Sir, let's kick off with the most exciting part of the day, which is, of course, the telco serie with Converge, the biggest IPO in history, basically coming to fruition. Finally, this is something that everyone had been excited about, and it's finally happening in the middle of a pandemic. How are you feeling about the pricing, especially as they had actually cut it? I mean, it was up to 24, probably expected naman that it would be cut. But how are you positioning yourself here, and how has the response been?
Great, thanks. Yeah, I mean, we started the international roadshows Monday, and then the books are already covered, so demand is very strong. It's continuing. We should price tonight. As you know, we've narrowed the price of 16.50 to 19, so it's already at the high end. It's already a 20% discount from the original number. So I guess the Warburg Pincus and the U's have been very accommodating because you want to give upside to the investors. So demand is strong. The book is covered. So I guess we will see on Monday, right, for the domestic offer, how the TPs come in. So that in general, the 130 TPs will have almost 40 million pesos each to invest in for their clients. And then LSIs will have to 100,000 pesos maximum online, which is what Mr. Munzon has been pushing. So that's good. You can order. And there will be a big tranche for that. We're excited because it's the biggest in the country, And then also, as you said, because the peso or there have been a lot of outflows, there'll be a lot of dollars coming into the country because of this IPO. So it's good. So that there'll be inflows, and it's a sign that despite the pandemic, there's a story for the Philippines, Danny.
That's really exciting, sir. Just why kaya, first of all, have the foreign investors been fleeing? And where are they putting their money? And why do you think that this IPO will be courting them back in the markets? Why are they much more special than the other big caps right
Yeah.
now?
No, no, no. I guess you're right, because even yesterday there was another forum that I attended. Our stocks are already cheap, and even colleagues in the other industry are saying that they were, in general, maybe the foreigners were concerned about our economic growth. It's more of that,
Mhm.
how fast we will recover. And maybe because of that, one of the findings we have with this pandemic is that there are some industries that really are doing very well and some that are not doing well. So late, of course, you
Mhm.
touch about airlines. We'll talk about it later.
Correct.
But
Yes.
but but telcos, especially broadband, where Converge
Mm-mm.
is doing very well, and it's actually benefiting from this because of the lockdown. Like us, you're from home. Your
Right.
kids, you're always teaching them. So those are the challenges. So it's a good sign that even in a country like ours, there's that need, and it's fast growing, and maybe that's exciting the foreign investors we're talking to, because they're realizing that the infrastructure now is has needs that pick up, and here is a
Mhm.
player who can deliver.
Sir, are you seeing an immediate impact on the other telco stocks once Converge comes into the market, or is there enough unsapped liquidity there for the other players to actually not, slide after this, and in fact possibly even rally? Because we've been seeing a rally in the telco space amid this Converge IPO. Why would that be? Especially since you should be shifting your portfolio by now.
Yeah. No, of course. Very happy working with Globe and PLDT. Also, their stocks have gone up almost 20-30% year to date, while the other conglos nga and the banks have got it hit, right? Uh, but then on the other hand, if you believe that it will continue to grow because nga of the pandemic and because of homeschooling and the need for internet and broadband, then even the traditional telcos will have improved uplines. So in a way, even their stocks are going to be cheap. So it's a possible that there will be a re-rating also of their prices, so that at least once Converge shows that it's leading the market, that there's interest, other investors who are not able to get enough shares of Converge will look at PLDT and Globe. Even Dito was going up
Mm,
several days, right? It just went down, I think, yesterday and also today. Even now it's gone up because they realize that there's a play there. And there's a lot of upside in the telco industry. So, admittedly,
mhm.
Converge is pure broadband, and
Right.
and while the traditional telcos have, it's probably a third lang, but so the high growth areas are this one, the broadband. But it's exciting because it'll affect also Globe and PLDT and the rest, and even Dito, because
Mhm.
I mean they're hopefully by January, when they have all their I guess they're working with the cable companies, right? I mean the tower companies. So once they have the towers installed and they can show operational efficiency, then they will start generating the revenue, and that'll be exciting for us also.
Sir, some investors have said, or analysts, that a lot of these surges have been speculative on the fact that with the Converge IPO, there might be a lot of partnerships. As you mentioned, they're broadband lang and they're not necessarily in the telco space. To what extent is this a possibility, and to what extent are investors actually pricing that in when they're looking at these telco stocks?
Okay. No, I guess in the case of Converge, we've had almost like 40% of the deal is covered by high quality long term investors, cornerstones, and then there's some anchors also that don't want to be identified yet, but there's our long term investors. So I think the fact that even this is a more of a pure play, it excites
Mhm.
them more pa nga, because they're seeing the higher growth, higher margins, and
Yeah.
very sustainable. So I think it's exciting, and it will make people rethink the Philippines. Kasi nga, I guess our government is doing its best already, as you said. While New York and Madrid and the rest are having their second, third waves, di ba? tayo, we've been consistent, but at least people, Filipinos, nakikinig tayo, we're wearing our mask, we're wearing our face shields. So doubling rates have gone down, have lengthened significantly. Hopefully the economy will restart. Yun na lang kulang talaga, it's the economy and the faith of the people to go out and shop and go to the malls and the restaurants, I guess.
And the infrastructure
Sir
and
Ed,
telcos.
Yes.
all right. Sir Ed, just right here, just want to jump in quickly here and ask about ABS-CBN and shares have hit ceiling yet again. How optimistic are you about the media network here? Do you see share price rebounding to pre-shutdown levels? How long or maybe how far off before that happens here?
Thanks, Jess. No, I mean ABS-CBN. We're happy that they were able. They're looking at alternatives. That's great, naman from Carlos' perspective and the board and management. They should find a way to reinvent themselves. So if they can block time with other companies, that's great. Of course, we knew that they were discussing also with your channel, right, to block time some more. I'm just not so sure if they can get to pre-shutdown levels because admittedly that's a big drop. But it will improve. But I don't think it will get to that level naman immediately unless they can really get a new franchise because that's really a big leap. But the fact that they're operating at least for those who want to see the talents and want to see the shows, I think it's great news for the market and for I guess for media in general.
Sir, what's it going to take for this stock to go back to pre-shutdown levels? I mean, do they need to prove something in terms of revenues or earnings? I mean, is this not
Or
enough?
reach?
Or
Yeah.
reach? Is this not enough consolation?
Probably not enough kasi 'di ba when you
Okay.
block time the model is different na 'di ba? And the bulk of the revenues were really coming from their free to air before and the revenues related to that, 'di ba? So, of course, block time is in a way, but the frequency of ABS-CBN and the viewership was pre-shutdown was really one of the largest, right? With GMA, of course, they have different coding numbers. So, if they just block time with a smaller channel, it's not the same, di ba? And of course, before, if you have 24 hours free TV and all the revenues that come from that versus block time, maybe you get 3-4 hours a day. So that just means 1/8 of what you could have gotten. So and the reach is different. So I don't think even the sponsors, the advertisers will not necessarily come in even if they have the same time slots because until they see that the viewership is there, the reach, is there, it will not reach the revenues and the income it made before. But I'm
Okay.
still positive, but it will take a while, I guess.
Yeah, so still very exciting here, but a lot to be proven. Nevertheless, if whether they'll be back to those previous levels. Now, sir, last question, sir, on your outlook. It's 2.5 months of the year na lang, and normally this should be the time of excitement, Christmas rally. But there's also the third quarter GDP figures looming in the horizon. And even a lot of things going on like the offshore issues with Trump and US fiscal stimulus spilling over effects as well here in the elections over in the US. What's your general sentiment now? Do you feel that the third quarter numbers might actually surprise on the upside in terms of earnings and GDP? Do you feel that the last two quarters will show that we are resilient and that the economy has slowly gone back to the levels that we were hoping to achieve?
Yeah, I'm a little cautious because I personally am hoping that the numbers will surprise us positively. Uh, but then because we're seeing all this bearish news and then even our inflation has, in a way, in the past, low inflation is positive. Now low inflation is seen as negative because it means we're not spending enough. So I'm just a
Okay.
little cautious, but at least in terms of demand from the borrowers of BDO. We're seeing pre-COVID loan growth,
Nice. Okay.
demand and everything. So that's a good sign. The branches are full. We've extended their hours again because there's so much activity happening. I'm just not seeing it yet in the restaurants. Me, I try to go to the restaurants at least 3 to 4 times a week because to help them also make money. But I'm not seeing it. It's kulang na kulang yung tao eh. So maybe people are still afraid. Until we see that, the normal flow, it's great. I was in a mall last weekend. At least it was normal in Estancia, but in the others, medyo quiet pa. So we just have to balance, I guess, the safety nga talaga and the economy. But I'm pushing also towards the economy kasi otherwise if you don't help the SMEs, the restaurants, the entrepreneurs, di ba, the feeling that it's normal won't happen. And then Christmas malungkot. But we're seeing
Yes.
signs. At least I'm seeing kasi di ba may pick up eh. They will start importing already. Our clients, we're seeing them importing. So the question na lang is sana when it gets to the stores because the inventory they're restocking, bilhin ng tao or dayuhin ng tao na importante.
Okay, sir. So from an aggregate level, you see or you feel that the loans, at least to the bigger conglomerates, are actually, rising here and money supply being tapped finally, but it might take a while for that to be penetrating the consumer and consumption habits while we still need to trust the government, of course, and the health and safety protocols.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. That was Ed Francisco, President of
Thank you,
BDO.
sir.
Any, Jess? Thank you.
And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Thursday, October 8th. I'm Danie Laurel.
Catch us again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. I'm Jess De Los Santos. We are One News.